Welcome back to the Occult Rejects. Today we're diving into a subject that gets talked about constantly, but rarely with this kind of depth, honesty, and firsthand experience that it really deserves, and that is Wicca. This is one of those words that a lot of people think they understand. Some hear it immediately and think of spell books, moon rituals, candles, pentagrams, and pop culture witches. Others hear it and think religion, priesthood, initiation, lineage, and mystery tradition. And the truth is, Wicca sits right at the crossroads of all of that. It's modern, but rooted in older currents. It is public in some ways, private in others. It is misunderstood by outsiders, argued over by insiders, and often flattened into something far simpler than it really is. And to help us unpack that today, we've got a great guest returning to the show. We got Thumper. Some of you already know him from his earlier appearance on the Occult Rejects, where we talked about his book, The Chaos Apple, Magic and Discordianism for the Postmodern Witch. Thumper is not just an author and occult voice. He is also a Gardnerian high priest, and that makes him somebody with real ties to initiatory Wicca, not just someone commenting on it from the outside. His published author bio also identifies him as an initiate of the Minoan Brotherhood, if I said that correctly, which gives him a lived relationship to modern witchcraft traditions rather than a purely academic one. That's part of why this conversation matters. We're not just talking about Wicca as a vague cultural idea or as a stereotype or as something filtered through fear, fantasy, or internet mythology. We're talking about it with someone whose background is actually rooted in the tradition, someone who can speak to its religious side, its magical side, its ritual structure, and the way it has evolved in the modern world. And in Thumper's case, that comes from both practice and writing, whether through his broader occult work or through the Chaos Apple, which presents him as a voice working at the intersection of witchcraft, chaos, and magic in postmodern occult thought. So today we're going to slow this down and really get into it. What is Wicca? Where did it come from? How much of it's religion? How much of it is craft? And how much of it has been distorted by outsiders or even by the culture around it? What makes Wicca different from broader witchcraft? What is its relationship to initiation, priesthood, ritual practice, deity, magic, and modern pagan identity? And maybe, just as importantly, why does Wicca still matter now? If you're coming into this curious, skeptical, sympathetic, or even critical, this should be a good one, because the goal here is not to do a cartoon version of Wicca. The goal is to talk about the real thing, its history, its practice, its tensions, and its place in the wider occult world. Now I'm going to shut up. Well, no, I'm not going to shut up. Before I introduce Headless and the guest, I do have some things I do want to mention, and then I'll shut up. On Saturday, April 25th, the Southeastern Masonic Symposium is happening in Asheville at the Asheville Masonic Temple, which is at 80 Broadway Street in Asheville, North Carolina. And I will be there in person. So come down, meet me and the rest of the crew. And who will be speaking there, you're thinking right now? John Michael Greer. He will be the keynote speaker. And then we got our boy Colin Concrete. He's been on the Occult Rejects twice and will be coming on again. He's also from American Esoteric. Check that out. And then we got the man himself, who's been almost a regular on the show. We got Ike Baker. He will be there. And we got Tom Carter. So if you want to come check it out and you want to smoke one with me, I will be there. And also I want to remind people about the website. If you're into reading, we have tons of information by multiple contributors, and we got t-shirts up on the site. If you're interested, we got two different kind, and they are $25 shipped. Fun fact, the art is all based on the eyeball. Now let me introduce the rest of the panel, which is only Headless and the guest. My man, Headless, what is going on, sir? You haven't fallen asleep, so let everybody know what's up.
How you doing? You can find me at the Headless Giant on YouTube and on Twitter. Oh boy,
yeah, we just lost
night. But tomorrow we got the mailbag. We're going to be doing some more remote viewing. If you want to get your email on the show, just email me at headlessgiantpodcast@gmail.com, and we will talk about your esoteric / interesting magical stories, as well as get some audience participation with remote viewing. So definitely check that out. And on Sundays, we got the trialogues coming up. Ricardo is somewhere in Wisconsin, and hopefully we'll meet up sometime this week and maybe shoot some video. So check that out. That'll be fun too. go over. Yeah, he's really digging into that with Minnesota and Michigan float copper. So he's there getting all the stories from native tribes. So it's going to be a big thing once he comes back in rotation and has all this research done.
Nice, good for him. Good for him. That's always awesome to be able to like actually have boots on the ground. Nice. Right. Look forward to that. And Thumper, sir, can you hear us?
Hello. Thank you for having me back. I apologize for the continued technical issues that are plaguing me today, but I will hang in there till the bitter end. But I'm very excited to be back.
No, thank you, sir. I appreciate it. And yeah, I mean, last time you had the feedback, we fixed that, and now it's just a video problem, or you actually just staying connected. So, we'll hopefully it'll happen this time. But thank you for coming on again, sir. I know I did mention earlier that. Go ahead. Oh, I can't hear you. You might have.
I said whenever I just randomly disappear.
Oof. Your mic is starting to muffle. Oh, what the fuck?
And there he goes.
Yeah, this isn't going to
talk about Wicca.
Yeah, right. I'm gonna have to change the title, and we're gonna do something else. Something.
Well, let me ask you this: what do you think the difference between religion and craft is?
The difference between religion and craft probably really isn't much, actually. I don't know. That's a good question. What do you think?
I think craft involves sort of like externalizing your belief system and creating something around you. Whereas when you're in a religion, you're participating in the rituals, but it's less about the creation process, right? The craft really does kind of talk about crafts, handicrafts and all the rest of that stuff, creating different things. And I don't know, is he back? Because that'd be a great question to ask him.
Yeah, Thumper, you there?
I am back for as long as I can be.
All right, awesome. Yeah, just one thing. Yeah, just the only thing is if for some reason your mic sounds a little bit muffled, maybe you got to move like the little piece over or something. Because I think you're using a headset, correct?
Okay. Yes. Is that better at all?
Yes, sir. Sounds good.
Okay.
Yeah, real quick, I guess if you want. Well, actually, before we start off, you want to plug anything, mention your book, or mention anything that you like?
Yeah, absolutely. So the book is called The Chaos Apple: Magic and Discordianism for the Postmodern Witch. There is no Wicca in it whatsoever, but it is a exploration of chaos magic and chaos magic from a witchcraft perspective, along with a whole lot of Discordianism. And it is available online and at open-minded bookstores everywhere.
Hell yeah. Awesome, sir. Thank you very much. All right. So, yeah, Headless's first question, I know it was really good. What was it again? The difference between religion and craft?
Religion and craft, yeah.
For me, I think the way I define religion is just basically.
Oh, wow. This isn't going to work out well. What the hell is going on here?
Mercury retrograde. We're going to have it over and over again.
Yo, Judith was talking about that earlier, too. And I was just like, I was like ready to like spaz out on fucking ChatGPT today. And I was like, yo, even AI is completely fucking retarded today. Yo, I was asking it to make me images, and it was like the shit that it was doing. I was just like, yo, like what the fuck? It was just like really bizarre. I was like, I didn't even ask for that. And then I was like, yo, can you make that in landscape? And like, it just made like this landscape image, like fucking water and mountains and trees. I was like, well, I ask you this all the time. We do a square size for the fucking Spreaker Thumb and landscape for YouTube. Now all of a sudden you think I want like, it was just, dude, it was acting like fucking stupid.
Well,
I kept on doing it, and I would tell it, don't do that. And it would spit out the same image and do it again. And I was like, yo, it's like talking to a fucking child. A motherfucker drooling in its wheelchair would understand me more than AI would have today.
Of course. I think a lot of people think that because technology is so cutting edge and so advanced and everything, that it's not susceptible to the same pressures that we are as humans, that is not the case. It's actually probably way more susceptible.
Yeah. Thumper, you're back now.
I am. I don't know how long you guys want to put up with this, but I will keep plugging back in every time it happens.
Yeah, we'll see. All right. Yes. The difference between craft and religion.
So I think religion is more, belief, shared values, whereas craft is the physical something you do. And I think witchcraft in general kind of intersects those two because it is very much a craft. It is very much an activity and a practice, but it brings, belief and value along with it.
Absolutely. And there is sort of like a recognition of fertility as an energy when it comes to craft, as opposed to religion, where it's just rote, repeating the same things. And, that's good. That's good for practice. But at the same time, it's not really the explosion of things that you can make and things you can cover your world with,
Exactly.
If you don't mind, they do have just like a basic question just for like the listeners. We do have people that listen to the show that probably really don't know much about practicing things, but just the stuff in general. My first question was for people who only know Wicca through like movies, TikTok, ignorant conspiracy theorists, or bookstore culture. What is Wicca in its real form to you?
Wicca for me is just another word for witchcraft. It kind of historically it is, or the original definition of Wicca is an experiential mystery tradition that traces back to the New Forest area of England.
Oh, and we lost him again. Yo, you remember yesterday when we were watching that video where they were showing the Pythagorean stuff?
Right.
Did you notice? Only reason I remember this because I just saw someone mention something about the Masonic apron. Do you remember at one point when they were showing you all the little designs I would make? It made that apron real quick at the end before it changed into something else. And I was like, "Yo, let me find out the fucking apron goes back to Pythagoras or some shit with the Masons."
It does, right? So a lot of people don't realize that the labor unions back then were a big part in constructing all of those temples and stuff. So all of this, divine knowledge passed through them. And then the Masons sort of picked up that mantle and said, we're actually continuing that geometric sort of thing. So sacred geometry is a huge part of Masonry as a craft.
Yeah. So Thumper, do you remember where you, I guess, disconnected? If you had anything else to say.
I do. I'd mentioned that Wicca being this kind of experiential initiatory mystery tradition that traces back to a specific area of England, although it really wasn't until the early 70s that the word Wicca started getting used. Prior to that, everybody just called it witchcraft. And after that, up through the mid-2000s, the words Wicca and witchcraft really were used interchangeably. So I know that there are people out there who say that, that you don't have to be a witch to be Wiccan, but in my mind, the two are just kind of permanently linked.
Yeah. Well, I always just looked at Wicca as a form of witchcraft.
Yeah, it's one expression of witchcraft.
Nice. All right, thank you, sir. Another one, real quick. When you say you're a Gardnerian high priest, what does that actually mean in practice, not just as a title?
In practice, it's basically admin of a coven. Gardnerian covens usually have a high priestess or a high priestess and a high priest. And my job is kind of a support role. The buck really stops with the high priestess. Everyone within a coven structure is an equal. The high priestess is just sort of the first among equals. She's the one who's directing the ship. And then my job as the high priest is just to support her and to help her however she needs, specifically like when running a ritual or just anything involving the circle itself. It's a very fancy sounding title, but the reality is, like, I'm a high priest of a coven. I'm not a high priest of like the entire tradition. Other covens don't have to bow down to me or anything. Yeah. If I go to another coven, I'm just a guest. I don't get to walk in and be like, oh, I'm here. I'm in charge now.
Yeah. That'd be some wild shit. Imagine that.
Yeah. It would be. It would probably be a lot of fun, but that's the reality is it's just having authority within one coven doesn't grant you authority anywhere else.
No, I get that. That's actually a good point that you made that, because it's not like the OTO or an organization where it's like, oh, if I took the 3rd degree, it doesn't matter what lodge I walk into, I'm a 3rd degree member still, you know.
Yeah,
or even like if you were a bishop of the EGC, you're going to be a bishop no matter where you go.
Exactly. And covens within the Gardnerian tradition and with other British traditional Wiccan lines or traditions are autonomous. So there is not like a high council overseeing all of us. We're all kind of just doing our own thing, just as part of the greater tradition.
I love it.
Right. It's kind of like a reflection of the sacred circle, sort of. Everybody inside the circle is, are equals in that ritual, and then dispersing afterwards. Then you're kind of on your own. Oh, there he goes again. I was going to get into that sacred circle motif because I think it's so central to the idea of Wicca. Having gone through, several different, covens and things like that, and understanding what they're doing, it really is like the reflection of the circle. When you're there, you're part of that circle,
Exactly.
There was something I wanted to bring up too, Thumper, going along with this, what you were kind of saying with the high priestess, and like it doesn't matter, the high priest, it doesn't matter where you go after that. Do you think, because I do think this starts to become a problem in orders. I saw it kind of with some people. When you start having degrees, and I'm just going to keep it real, some of that just means how long you've been showing up. Let's just keep it real. It doesn't mean you're actually fucking doing anything. You can have somebody that has a degree higher than yours, and all of a sudden people kind of almost, put them up on a pedestal, start thinking this. Do you think not actually kind of doing that stuff in Wicca maybe actually helps with, I guess, the overall group without anybody kind of like being worshipped or looked at as better than the next?
I think it does help because it's really within the Gardnerian tradition. It does have a degree system, first degree, second degree, third degree, but they're more milestones of progress than anything else, and kind of just like where you are on your individual path. The only benefit of being a 3rd degree is that you can start your own coven.
Oh, okay, all right. So then
you've gotten all the material you need to go.
I guess the OTO.
So really, the only reason why. Huh?
Sorry, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Oh, the only reason for like anyone within a coven to move into that 3rd degree position is if they're planning on like taking over once the current leaders step aside or don't feel like doing it anymore, or if they're going to go out and start their own coven.
Okay. Now, so now the coven that you were in had a degree system. Is that normal for other covens too? Have you seen that?
Yeah. Within the Gardnerian tradition, yes. And within other British traditional Wiccan lines, they all have usually a 3-degree system. It is very Masonic in that respect. I think there are some lines of the Alexandrian tradition that have 5 degrees, maybe. But kind of the rule of thumb is a 3-degree.
Interesting. All right. Yeah. See, I didn't know that. I just assumed they didn't have degrees. All right. Cool. One more quick question, and then Headless, if you have another one, you can throw it in there. But I did also want to ask, what do outsiders most consistently, your opinion, what do outsiders most consistently get wrong about Wicca?
Ooh, there he goes.
What do you think? What do you think, Headless?
Well, I think it's probably the medieval sort of conception of what a witch is and what they're doing all the time. So it's sort of like the outsider. But if you've actually ever been a part of a Wiccan tradition, you see that these are just normal people. They're just expressing themselves in a different way than what a lot of people consider normal religious expression. But I don't think it's necessarily too much different. If you go to a charismatic church, you find the same sort of divine madness or ecstatic tradition that you would find within any sort of coven, only probably to a more extreme degree, right? So, I mean, There is the ecstaticism that goes on within a circle. I mean, we're talking about the cone of power. You're building energy. There's something tangible to the affect that you're building in these circles that I think a lot of people just get wrong. You know, they're not really seeing it for, you know, the landscape that it is, you know.
I think what most people, especially within like greater pagandom, get wrong about traditional Wicca is its history. I think a lot of people are like, Gerald Gardner invented Wicca to see naked ladies. The end.
I've heard people basically say that too.
Yeah.
It's just kind of
or the slightly longer version of that is Gerald Gardner cherry-picked closed practices from indigenous cultures to see naked ladies. And like, none of that is true. None of that is what actually happened, but it's sort of this creed that goes around, especially on social media. And people repeat it, but that is a very oversimplified and inaccurate perception of, you know, a 40-year chunk of history.
Yeah. I don't know if you can answer this question, and it's just wondering: is nudity like a thing within Wicca? Like, or does it like?
Yeah.
All right, and is it a thing, coven to coven, or is that like some kind of wide? I don't know, how do I ask this? Could that be specific to each coven, or is it kind of like a practice or a thing in the practice that is going to be widespread regardless?
Within traditional Wicca, there is ritual nudity.
Okay,
that's just, and that's kind of one of the non-negotiables. It is all very consensual, right? Yeah. Like we all know that we're going to get naked, and we all have no problem getting naked. But within like non-initiatory Wicca and eclectic Wicca that I think people are more familiar with, there usually is not any kind of emphasis on ritual nudity. But within the Gardnerian tradition, that's just how we practice. When I'm on my own, when I'm just doing witchcraft and chaos magic in my living room, I'll wear whatever I'm wearing. But when I'm with my coven, when we're doing rituals, we're all naked.
Oh, shit. Everybody? Holy fuck.
Yep.
Wow. Oh, interesting. No, I've had that experience.
I was going to say, the first time you experience it, it's the first time I experienced that, I was like, this is weird. And it becomes such a non-issue so very quickly. Like,
I mean, I guess I'll say for me, I've even mentioned it on the show plenty of times. You know, I was in the OTO and I had watched the Gnostic Mass on YouTube. So when I went to go to the OTO to go see the Gnostic Mass, it was a little different. You know, titties came out and I was like, yo, what the I remember thinking like, yo, it's going to turn into like Eyes Wide Shut. What the fuck's going on here?
Yeah.
And obviously it didn't bother me too much. I stayed for 5-6 years. I guess I got used to it. But yeah. It was a surprise, but I guess after the fact, I don't know. I guess it just didn't surprise me.
Right. Well, I think there is something to the idea of being skyclad and the leaving all of the, you know, preconceived or mental baggage behind, because it's such a change of state from our normal life to being in a different state. It changes the consciousness entirely. So you can actually, you know, focus more on the ritual because you're like, wow, I mean, what else am I here for? I'm buck naked in the woods. So there is that element to it.
And there's a comfort level, like a physical comfort level that I don't think gets discussed enough, because the kind of the cultural perception of nudity is that if you're naked, you're up to something sexual. You know, the idea of nudity not equating to sexuality is really foreign to people.
Yeah, the only reason you're covered off is because you're fucking. That's basically how humanity.
You know, if you've got, you know, 5 to 13 people packed into somebody's living room with a bunch of candles being lit and everyone's dancing around and it gets sweaty and warm, and it's just a lot more comfortable to not have to have layers of clothes on.
I've been drenched. I've been drenched myself just doing rituals by myself Without even I used to have the AA robe. I'm not even talking about wearing that hood. Nothing over my head, just a regular fucking robe. And I've been drenched just from 2 candles inside my living room for a little bit.
Yeah. It's because we do raise a lot of energy that way, right? It's a very energetic thing. And my coven, there would be times where we would have kind of students coming in, and so we're not doing initiatory things with them, but we would still do rituals. And I would just sit there and just pick at my shirt, and I was constantly almost setting myself on fire because I wasn't used to moving around with clothes on. And I was like,
over the charcoal, the incense burner, and fucking started burning the altar cloth and shit. I'm so many times. Fucking spaz.
You don't have to worry about that when you're not wearing pants, right? Like, you don't have to worry about, like, if I bump into a candle holder naked, I might, get a little red mark on my leg. But if I bump into it wearing jeans, I stand the chance of going up in flames.
Yeah. Oh man, I'd have to shave. My hair could catch on. Fun.
I think this is something that a lot of people miss about the Greek tradition too, where they're doing sports naked and they're doing all this other stuff. I mean, the word gymnasium means nudity, means naked. And the reason why is because the initiatic state of rebirth requires being naked, right? That's what they're sort of saying. So all of the stuff that they're doing naked requires some sort of sacred connection or, some symbolic connection of being past the point of rebirth, right? So exactly. A lot of people just miss that entirely. There's a divinatory nature to it because you are as you came into the world.
Yeah. And nudity is the great equalizer, right? Like, when we think about going into like a high Protestant or Catholic church, and you've got the priest in the very rich robes, and then you've got people wearing their Sunday best, and some people's Sunday best is better than others, and everybody notices. And clothing really creates a power differential. Like the people who are dressed the most expensive are going to be the ones who are clearly the ones with the most authority. When everyone's naked, that is taken away. Nobody has any more power than anyone else.
Oh, I could see that. Yeah, you don't know if he came in a suit or sweatpants.
Exactly.
Yes, you know what I'm saying? Keeping it real. Yeah, you have no idea. Showed up with fucking, expensive clothes or fucking Walmart.
There was actually an old woodcut, and I want to say it's from either the 14th century or 15th century, but it's called The Four Witches. And it's these 4 naked women dancing around a skull. And one of them, but the only clothing they're wearing are headdresses. And one woman has a peasant headdress, and one woman has sort of a merchant class headdress, and one woman has a very regal kind of, monarchy looking headdress. But because they're all naked, their status in society doesn't matter because they're practicing witchcraft together. And because it was the 1400s, and then they're going to hell. And, witches could be anywhere. But when you look at the woodcut itself, they're all equal.
Right. And this is the reflection of the circle again. It's the ultimate sort of egalitarian space. What you're doing is you're removing all of that, and then you're in a completely different world, basically.
Exactly.
Something I wanted to ask, too. You might have kind of partially answered this. Is Wicca primarily a religion, a craft, a mystery tradition, or does trying to separate those already miss the point?
I'm going to say yes. The word religion does not actually have a definition. That's something that scholars debate about what is true religion. There's certainly a belief system kind of tied to Wicca and tied to witchcraft. But witchcraft is much more of a practice than a belief system. If you believe things, especially if you're practicing with other people, you have shared beliefs based on your shared experiences. And, when I was getting initiated, or after I'd gotten initiated in the Gardnerian tradition, no one ever told me, here's what we believe, by the way. It was, here's how we cast a circle. Here's the ritual we're doing. Here's the incense. Your job is to hold the incense or whatever. And I had beliefs develop over time, and they were very similar to everyone else's beliefs. But the reason we all had those shared beliefs is because we were doing things the same way, and we were practicing together and getting the same results from our practice, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Good.
Thank you, sir. Ellis, you got anything?
Yeah, I do. I was going to ask the question about crafting poems, because what I've noticed in the more Wiccan traditions is that things have to be in a type of harmony and cadence that is very specific to that sort of Wiccan tradition. And so, what is your methodology of reaching the inspiration level to actually get the right poems and the right cadence down?
Part of it is repetition, and especially like if we're doing a chant or something, if the coven is doing a spell and we're all chanting something, it's sort of, one person will start and then we kind of follow their cadence, and so we end up all kind of in sync. I think there's this idea that rhyming couplets specifically kind of taps into a different part of the brain that kind of like within chaos magic, we talk about gnosis and getting into that specific mindset that we need to work magic. I think chanting, and especially using rhyme, because it kind of forces your brain to think a little bit differently, helps get into that mindset as well.
I do think even just like certain way of saying things, I do think it can even hit your own like conscious in a different way.
Yeah. And also, I think there's also sort of a kind of an unofficial tradition to it, in that, like when we see, like in pop culture, when we see witches cast spells, they're always rhyming, right? And in comic books and cartoons, the spells always rhyme. But when we look back into, especially getting into British folklore, there'd be little charms that you would say to, over the cow to make sure the cow gave good milk or whatever. And even hundreds of years ago, they were still writing these rhymes. There was still a cadence and a rhyme scheme to everything. And I think there was just this idea that poetry itself was sort of inherently magical.
Right. I think that's something that a lot of people are missing out, is that the way that the witch or the native or the ancestral practitioner sees the world is in a type of harmony that can be reflected. And what you're trying to do is tap into that harmony of the universe. And this is why, it's important to have the cadence and everything else. And one of the mainstream examples of that would be cadence within the military. Right. So as they're marching, the way that everybody stays in step is through these 4/4 poems that the drill sergeants are barking out. So it's kind of like a coven in a lot of ways.
It is. There's something very similar there. But even like if you think of like an evangelical preacher, even if they're not rhyming, there's a specific cadence to how they're speaking.
Yeah.
And you can hear it from preacher to preacher. There's that very specific, like Low Country Baptist sound to it that gets people into that altered state. That the preacher is getting themselves worked up, but the congregation is getting worked up by listening to it.
Oh yeah. It's funny, some of those types of places, I feel like that makes it so obvious. Like you could take like 5 of those preachers and play them, and like you'll hear exactly like the same, like you'll be like, oh, that must work.
Exactly. It's a very learned thing. It's a very learned way of thinking.
Yeah, I've noticed that with certain I'm not going to try to repeat it, but I have noticed with like just certain ways things are said or I guess emphasized in like Baptist churches, or like those ones where they get all crazy going. It's just like I don't know, just to me it's just funny. It's like you don't realize this person is like saying this like to get you going. I don't know, to me it's quite obvious.
Oh
yeah. That it's subtle, because you build to it, right? It's like a concert. You start off kind of conversational, and then you get a little louder, and you get the cadence in there, and you start hitting certain words, and so you're raising energy, or that preacher is raising the energy of the congregation.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I like it. Another question for you here, sir. What drew you specifically into initiatory Wicca rather than staying in a more solitary or eclectic path?
Absolute skepticism is what drew me in.
Okay.
So I kind of stumbled across Wicca for the first when I was like 18, 19 years old, and
Everybody.
had started, buying kind of the, Wicca for the Solitary Practitioner and Buckland's Complete Book of Witchcraft and all the classics that everyone in my generation started with.
That Buckland book is dry as shit though, but it is good.
It is. It's a classic. It's got its moments and it's got its dry parts. But it everything I read, especially like in the 90s when there was sort of this Celtic Renaissance going on and everything was very, kind of not fantasy oriented, but very romanticized. Mm-hmm. So everything I read was like, Wicca is this ancient religion that was also created in 1954, but it's also ancient. And nobody seemed to, even all these authors who are cranking out all these books, didn't seem to have a clear understanding of where this stuff came from. And at some point I was in my late 20s, and so I kept doing it because I enjoyed it and I was getting something out of it. But in my late 20s, I got really curious as to like, I want to understand where did this start? Why do people do this? And there was, there used to be a website years ago called Witchvox, the Witch's Voice. And there are all these like coven listings. And I found a Gardnerian coven in my area. And I reached out and they referred me to a Gardnerian high priest whose coven was in California. He just happened to be living in Houston near me. And so he and I started talking and we started working together. And 9 months later, I flew to California and ended up naked in somebody's living room getting initiated. And the more I learned about, there was initiatory stuff that I learned that I found fascinating, but that also gave me a really good perspective on the actual history of, why was Gardner doing what he was doing, and who were the people who initiated him, and where did they get their ideas? And
I was just thinking that, sir. Not to interrupt you, but I was like, wait. I was like, he was a student of Crowley, and I think he was in the OTO. Maybe I'm just taking a guess.
He had a charter, so he actually had a charter to start a chapter of the OTO. He met Crowley once, and Crowley was kind of on his deathbed at that point. But Crowley signed a charter for him, and when he passed away, Gardner was like was understood to be like the European liaison of the OTO, but it ended up passing to somebody else, to a woman whose name escapes me. So Gardner was like never actually practicing in the OTO, even though he had this charter. He'd never been like initiated or inducted into it.
Well, I guess, all right. That is interesting. What I was going to get at is, with the OTO, I guess if you want to become like a full member, there is going to be nudity involved. And it kind of sounds like it with Wicca. So I was just wondering if there was even an influence from that.
Oh, so the nudity came from, I think the witches who initiated Gardner, because there was this actual coven. That's right. Did he find them in the woods or some shit? He met them through a Rosicrucian order.
Okay.
Gardner had this like crazy Indiana Jones style life. And when he was working as a customs official in Southeast Asia, because he had grown up in Southeast Asia because he had horrible asthma as a child, so his parents just shipped him overseas to a better climate. And he had a caretaker, like a nanny, traveling with him, who married a plantation owner in what is now Sri Lanka. So he just kind of got stuck there as a kid and grew up there and was working for plantations, but he was always in trouble because he had befriended all the locals. So he was demanding equal pay and equal rights for all the native workers. And so upper management was like just over him. But he ended up as a customs official. And when he retired, he moved back to Highcliffe, the Highcliffe area of England. And he was interested in the occult and he was interested in the metaphysical. And he joined this Rosicrucian order. And he didn't think very highly of it. he felt like the people who were running it were kind of full of themselves. But there was a group involved with that was called the Cortona Fellowship, was the name of the Rosicrucian order. And there was a group of people who were kind of doing their own thing, and he kind of fell in with them. And they basically said, we're practicing witchcraft, and initiated him into what they were doing. What they were doing was probably like a modified henotheistic co-masonry. Like it wasn't the passed down since the hills, right? It wasn't like this ancient thing. But it was this cool little, it still, worked for them. And they practiced ritual nudity. Gardner was also a nudist. And when he moved back to England, his asthma came back. So his doctor recommended that he try sunbathing in the nude, and he joined a nudist colony. And so when he started his own coven, he just built a little cottage on the grounds of this nudist resort. And all of the original members of the coven were also nudists. So the nudity just stuck.
Wait, and then now that was were we talking about asthma at one point?
Yeah, so Gardner had really bad asthma as a child, which is why his parents sent him out of England. Okay. They sent him to Southeast Asia so he could breathe easier.
Gotcha. Oh, for some reason, I was thinking that the clothes coming off was a fix for it.
Well, it was sunbathing, getting out of the city and into a warmer climate, and sunbathing. The doctors suggested to him to deal with when he moved back to England, his asthma came back, and so a doctor shipped him off to the woods to get some sunshine.
It's
hear that,
funny
ladies? If you get naked, you can help your asthma.
Yeah. And
that's funny how
kind of a pseudoscientific theory at the time, though, that like vitamin D was good for what ails you. So if you were having any kind of respiratory problem or whatever, you just went to a nudist resort and lay around naked, and that would fix you.
It's funny how the ancient ways talk about sunshine as medicine, and it sort of stays true over and over again. Like we've got this guy named Dr. Jack. I forgot his full name, but he's talking about how if you get the sun's rays at dawn, it regulates your hormones for the rest of the day. And so there's this all-pervading idea that there is a connection to the sun, and yet, it's sort of like just out of reach for most people to really understand that, hey, you're supposed to be in nature. You're supposed to be close to the sun in many different ways. So it's
absolutely.
I think there's a return to that.
I think there was also, I agree with you. I fully agree with you. I also think just because, medical science being what it was in the 30s through the 50s, London was like the most polluted city on the planet, right?
Right.
And so this kid growing up in London, they're like, oh gosh, he has asthma. What could have caused his asthma? And then they send him to a different climate. They're like, oh, the climate fixed him. No, the lack of air pollution fixed him. And so when he was sent to a nudist resort, it was out in the countryside with no pollution.
That is interesting. Who would ever think it's not actually this person?
The coal dust sticks to your clothes, and so that creates the immune reaction in your lungs. And so getting rid of the clothing actually will stop the reaction as well. So you're kind of fixing the problem from two different directions with nudity and sunbathing.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was, and it's funny because I think, as when we were talking about ritual nudity earlier, that is one of those things, especially from like the greater pagan community, where there's this like, oh, well, Gardner just wanted to see everyone naked. And, there was this like sinister reason for bringing in ritual nudity. And it was legitimately just like a health tonic. And everyone that he was in his coven were also nudists. So it was just a no-brainer for them. Like, we're already naked. Do we need to put clothes on for this? No? Okay, let's practice some witchcraft.
Okay, I got you, yeah.
Right. And it's funny, too, because a lot of people talk about Crowley as being this, horrendous addict, and he's doing heroin all day. And it's like, he was prescribed that by a doctor. They gave that to him as a prescription. So it was the establishment that was kind of giving him the medicine that was killing him. So what are we talking about here?
There was a meme that went around one time, and it was like it was a picture of an old cough syrup bottle from like the 1800s, and it was like proof that old timey doctors did not fuck around, and all the ingredients were like morphine, opium, cocaine, and cherry phosphate. It was insane.
People basically walking around sipping like fucking liquid heroin.
Oh yeah, everybody was drinking laudanum for their nerves.
Right? It's like they're walking around with like a fucking fentanyl patch on their back already. They're just sipping that shit all day, catching a buzz.
And there was just not, at the time, there was just not an understanding of what those particular chemicals were doing to the people, right?
Oh yeah, they probably didn't realize until like they caught a habit that was like, oh fuck, this isn't good. Like it probably was, nobody really knew, probably either.
Oh yeah. They would not have known like just how addictive something like heroin or morphine could have been. And so when somebody got hooked, it was like, well, what's wrong with him? Why does he, clearly there's a lack of willpower on his part. It's like, no, you gave him the world's most addictive substance as medication.
Yeah, sorry, my doctor gave it to me, and kind of more fucked than I was prior.
Exactly.
Yeah. I have another question for you. This might be interesting. Was there ever a moment where Wicca stopped being interesting for you in your Wiccan career?
There kind of was, where like there was a period in, I'm going to say like the mid to late 2000s, when I'd been initiated for a while and and I, loved that practice, and I loved my coven and I loved working with them. But I got to a point where I'd stopped identifying as Wiccan because the kind of new age influenced eclectic Wicca that had gotten so prominent was so different from what I was doing that I didn't really want anything to do with that. I wanted to be able to differentiate myself in my own practice from that.
There's actually, not to interrupt you, but there's been a few people. I went on somebody's show and they asked me if I was a Thelemite. And I was like, yeah, I guess. I said, but it's like, and they're like, why'd you say it like that? And I was like, well, I guess to think about it, yeah. I mean, I'm into, I'm into that, but it's just like there's almost an embarrassment with even saying it, and I even said that.
Yeah.
And the person had said, I have had a few guests all say that they're now embarrassed to say it because of the way social media and people don't know jack shit about it that people seem to think to make it look.
Yeah, and the word Wicca itself got, went through a period where it was very trendy, and this idea of Wicca was very trendy. And a lot of people heard of it and started identifying as Wiccan without really knowing what it was or where it came from. And there was this, I don't know who said it first. If I ever meet whoever said it first, I will backhand them. Wicca is whatever you want it to be. And I was like, something that can be anything is nothing. Right?
Dude, you gotta do it with a pair of white gloves too. You gotta slap them in the face with like a pair of white gloves.
And so I just kind of hit a point where what I was doing was witchcraft. What other people, I was meeting people who would call themselves Wiccan, and I just didn't relate to them, and I just didn't feel like I had, like, my practice didn't just looked nothing like their practice. So I was kind of like, if they want to hang on to the word Wicca, that's fine. Because, like I said, up until like 1971, all this stuff that was coming out of England was called witchcraft, and then the word Wicca kind of slipped into the vernacular, and so Wicca was just like Wicca was just a way of saying witchcraft from the British Isles. But then, like in the 90s, once The Craft came out and Charmed came out and Buffy came out, and there was this very specific idea of this sort of pop culture infused Wicca. And I was like, y'all hang on to the word. I got into this to be a witch. Y'all can be Wiccan. Today, specifically because of TikTok, there is so much, misinformation and random animosity towards Wicca that I started identifying as Wiccan again just to piss everybody off. because these little kids get online. They're like, oh, Wicca, it's so awful. It's bought. There are people who are like saying Wicca's evil. It's an evil religion. And I'm like, okay, well then I'm Wiccan because that infuriates you and that pleases me. And so now,
you know what the thing is that like who's like, I hate to say it, but I mean that even kind of proves the point that you are a magician.
Well, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Well, no, I mean it's just a simple fact that like, look at the power you have over people that you're not even think about it. People are getting pissed and angry because you identify as pretty fucking powerful.
It makes me so happy. I shouldn't derive.
I know. I get like that every once in a while. I practice some black magic and watch people get triggered. I get it.
Oh yeah, but it's just when I talk like on TikTok videos when I'll talk about Wicca, and I get comments over and over and over from these kids who think they're making a point, but they say that same screed. It's Wicca was that's cherry picked from closed practices, and I'm like, which ones? And they go, white sage. And I was like, okay, white sage is actually not used in Wicca because Wicca derives from British witchcraft, and it would have been garden sage, not white sage. Like they don't know what they're saying; they just know to repeat these things. But if it makes people uncomfortable, then I'm doing my job as a witch. Being a witch shouldn't make people comfortable.
It would, I like it. That is yeah, so I can kind of identify with that for sure, what you were saying. So that and just overall the whole public, I think, I'll even throw it in there with Wicca and Thelema. I think to a certain extent, even just because, like, depending on, I know it's like hard for maybe sometimes for people to separate this shit, but sometimes the person who started this stuff, regardless of who they were as a person, they might have actually had something to offer in what they're giving to you. And sometimes you have to remove that person and actually look at the system itself.
Yeah,
and I do feel like, because of Aleister Crowley, and now because of Gardner, because I do know that's a thing that the nudity, and a lot of people, like you're saying, oh, the guy just wanted to get people naked. They already got a bad rap from the beginning.
Yeah, well, Gardner, but by all accounts, from people who knew him, he was a pretty good guy.
No, like, that's what they said. He was
his main thing, though, was that when he was initiated into this coven, this New Forest coven, he truly believed that this was the remnants of a pre-Christian religion, because that was like the prevailing theory at the time, that what we think of as witchcraft is actually the remnants of pre-Christian religion, right? That had started like in the 1860s and really like picked up steam. So when Gardner met these people who were practicing something that appeared to be witchcraft and were identifying as witches, he was like, oh, the old religion, it still exists. And he really, his concern, especially because everyone in this coven, this original coven, they were like, they had a shelf life. These were people in their 50s and 60s. These were not spring chickens. And his concern was that, oh no, the old religion is going to die out. So he really wanted to figure out how to keep it going, and how do I make this where younger people will want to carry the torch, right? And when he started getting publicity, he never made any money off of witchcraft, but he did start getting publicity. And at some point he was like, oh, I like this publicity stuff. This is great. And he became kind of this attention whore, right? And he was very much like, oh, there's no such thing as bad press. And the other witches were like, in fact, there is. They all think the same.
Oh, then again, I think that's very, maybe you got that from Crowley as well, because I think they're both but see, then again, that is even something that might have even been a magical thing of theirs, where I've even said my opinion. I think Kanye West is an occultist. That's just my opinion. And I think he does weird fucking shit just so he stays relevant sometimes.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I think Shia LaBeouf. I never know if it's Shia or Shia LaBeouf.
You one. Think really? Okay, that's cool. That's interesting.
Sort of appears everybody kind of forgets about him, and then he does something really effed up in public, and then he's in the headlines again.
Bringing his girl to play the violin and do some bullshit ritual in front of the Statue of Liberty. I mean, besides propaganda, whatever the fuck he was doing, trying to say something to Germany. I mean, I'm sure it was just like a spectacle too. It's like, oh, this will get my name out there. People be like, oh my God. Again, no publicity, is bad publicity, whatever. I forgot the phrase. It's all good publicity.
That was the one thing where I think Gardner was sort of idealistic to a fault, where he liked the publicity, but he was like, isn't it great? We're not Satanists. We're worshiping the great goddess. And her horned consort, who, looks like the devil, but he's not the devil. But he was like, isn't it great that we have this, this basic alternative to Christianity, right? You can actually practice a truly British religion that comes from the people. And polite society was like, you're going to hell and we don't like you. So, and the witches around him were like, we really wish you would stop doing this. But he was like, no, it's great. It's great. They're gonna understand. And they never did. So his idealism kind of, and he did like the attention, but he didn't realize how much negative attention he was bringing onto the people around him.
Right. I think there's an aspect of picking at social cohesion that I think a lot of magicians will use in a way that, everybody, once they're mad, it kind of creates that social cohesion again. So in a lot of ways, I see these characters sort of existing at the fringes, kind of being used by the establishment to keep the sheep in the pen. And I think that's something that everybody misses is, hey, this guy who's doing a bunch of naked rituals in the woods, that's got nothing to do with me. That's never the first thing that comes to their mind. The first thing is I'm under attack. So it's
and that's what a witch should do, right? Is challenge social norms and shake things up and be on the fringes. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's like kind of historically that is the role of that person, right? The person who, and I even though I was just bashing pop culture witchcraft, I will say, like, when you think of practical magic and the two ants living in the old house and everyone in town is afraid of them, but they still sneak to the house in the middle of the night when they need help. Right. And I think that's kind of the role of the witch, like not to be part of society, but definitely be there to be of service to society.
Yeah.
Right. That gives you the vibes of the sort of, hey, all else has failed. Let's go back to the old ways.
No, that is interesting.
That is, I think it's very last resort, right? Like, and that was part of why Gardner got involved with witchcraft was because of World War II. Because he was very patriotic, and he's this little old dude with asthma. And he joined, when he moved back to England after he retired, he joined the Citizens Brigade, which was training civilians in case Germany invaded England to fight in the streets, basically. Oh. And Gardner's job was to make Molotov cocktails. And so that's what he did in his spare time, right? He made Molotov cocktails to throw at Germans in case they invaded. But the New Forest Coven did magical workings to try to stop Hitler from invading. And there was, when you said Cone of Power earlier, that's where that name comes from, is from what was called Operation Cone of Power, where the witches were raising energy or raising power, directing it towards where they thought Hitler might be to basically cause him to change his mind to not invade England.
It was a little bit more intricate than that. So the Nazis were using dowsing to do sub hunting.
The Thule Society, they had a whole occult arm.
Right. So the Cone of Power was more like a shield, and what they were doing was sort of blocking dowsers. So you had like a whole magical war going on in the background of this other war happening, and a lot of people just passed that over as like, well, something occultism, but they're really not looking at the intelligence purposes of the stuff. And then we've got remote viewing today, which is being used by these deep state organizations to collect intelligence in a lot of other ways. So we're kind of stuck in this sort of middle-aged sort of milieu of not understanding how magic and information are connected. Whereas, these governments are engaged in these sort of occult warfare against each other, against us. It's crazy.
This is such a random side note, but I have a fun remote viewing story for you, where I was involved in a it was if you're familiar at all with Greg and Dana Newkirk, who they run the Museum of the Weird, this big traveling show, paranormal investigation. They on their podcast one time, or they done a basically for their subscribers to the museum, to their Patreon, were doing remote viewing tests where they had friends in different locations, and you would get to see a picture of the friend, and then we all were like taking notes and trying to write down what we saw. And I wrote down, they told us to think about shapes and don't think about words, and I kept picturing a boulder, so I drew a boulder, and I drew something else, and then I started thinking about Mork and Mindy, and I was writing Mork and Mindy.
Oh,
and so my final answer was, this person is in Colorado. And she was not. She was in Cincinnati with them, and she was like down the street at a local brewery or something. And I was so despondent, right? Like, I'm an internet psychic. I should be able to do this. And of course, everybody else in the comments is just nailing it. And I'm in a different state. I'm in Colorado for whatever reason. And I was talking to a friend of mine later, and I was like, I'm so like, where did I get Colorado? Why would I even? That was so off base. And my friend got really quiet, and she was like, "You said Colorado?" And I was like, "Yeah." And she was like, "The girl in that picture is originally from Colorado. She's from Boulder. She just moved up to be with them, to meet with them a couple of weeks ago."
Right.
So the whole time I thought I was off, I was reading her. I figured out where she was from.
Right. And see, that's what a lot of people. Right. That's what a lot of people miss when they get despondent about remote viewing, is that you might not be on target, but you could be tangential to the target. So it's always important to have the tangential information, because you never really know whether or not this could be, a side thing to the actual thing that you're looking at. And, practice is how you come into bringing that focus into exactly what you're looking for.
I have also, no, you're absolutely right. And so that kind of gave me some hope, right? Like, I locked onto I didn't get the location, but I locked onto the person. But I've also learned that apparently people who practice some form of divination, like I'm really into lithomancy, and I've got other, friends who read tarot, all this stuff. Apparently people who have some other way of expressing themselves psychically suck at remote viewing. Because it's just a completely different discipline than the one that they've developed a skill with.
That's gonna be my excuse why I suck at it. I like that. Thank you.
Nothing to do with Wicca. I went off on a tangent there, but
that's great. I mean, we do a remote viewing show with our audience every week now. So
awesome.
Yeah, that was great timing, dude. I did have a couple other questions. How did initiation change your understanding of witchcraft from the inside?
That's a really good question. I think it made me. So the first thing that I experienced, I'm like having flashbacks. I'm going down memory lane. The high priest of the coven that I was getting initiated into made a comment one time about how when he was initiated, he walked in thinking, "Oh, I've been practicing witchcraft for however many years. I've got this." And then he walked into the circle and was like, "Oh shit, this is real." And so I was like, "Okay, well, that's your experience. I'm going to have my own experience." And I was kind of in my head about the whole thing, but I was like, we're going to go through this one way or another. We're going to have an adventure, right? Like, it may just be me dancing around with a bunch of middle-aged naked people. That's fine. So my turn. It's time to walk into the circle, and I'm like, okay, well, let's do this. And oh shit, this is real. And it was just this very, like, everything within the circle was very different and very visceral. And in terms of like the presence of deities, that they were present, they were there, right? Even like down to a weird temperature change in the circle and out of the circle. And it just, for what it, like, that really made me accept the reality of witchcraft, that it wasn't just poetry and metaphor, right? Like, it wasn't spicy psychology like this. Oh, this is actually witches practicing witchcraft. The downside to that is because I had such a real experience when I became part of the Gardnerian tradition before I really got involved in my local pagan community. And because I had this very intense, real experience, I assumed that everyone else was out there having real intense experiences. And so I was kind of let down when I started meeting other pagans, and they were like, yes, witchcraft is, it's poetry and metaphor and spicy psychology. And I'm like, and also dancing around naked and kissing the devil's buttocks. And they're like, no, witchcraft, it's love, it's light. And it was very jarring to want to be part of a greater community and then realize I had like very little in common with that community because of the experiences I'd already been through.
Thank you, man. I like that.
If that answered your question.
Yeah, no, it did. It actually got me thinking about my own experience. So yeah. I would just even say certain things, for me, I think looking back and like with some of the I guess the initiations, not getting into them too deep, but between that and I guess maybe group work that I was a part of, when you start looking, I guess, at the scenery and the way things are supposed to be set up, regardless if even the people there that set it up even understood what they were doing, they're still going by a certain thing that's supposed to be done. And at one point, just for me, I was like, I really do think there's actually some deeply layered occult shit in this that I don't think I ever probably would have even fathomed if I was just an outsider.
Yeah. And that's when we talk about the mystery of something, a mystery isn't something to be solved. A mystery is something that can't be explained, only experienced.
Yes.
So a lot of times, when people want to know more about the Gardnerian tradition, if they ask me something and I say, I can't tell you that, it's not, I won't tell you that. It's that I don't really have the vocabulary to explain that well to you. You had to have been there, right? Like, it's something you're going to have to go through yourself, and then you understand it, even if you can't explain it. But we've had that experience together.
No, that's very. It's funny is that guy Colin Concrite that I mentioned that's going to be at that symposium. I had even spoken to him after the show. Me and him had a talk because we had very similarities with our experience, and it was funny how like we were saying certain things to each other that was like, oh wow, I never thought of trying to explain it that way. We knew exactly what the fuck each other was saying.
Yeah,
it was just we're at a loss for words for it though. But like I think we both were the best way we were trying to explain it. We're like, oh fuck, I know exactly what you mean by that.
Exactly. So, yeah.
You're saying, and those, not trying to pat myself on the back, and maybe those were mysteries that me and him understood because we experienced together. Not together, same experience.
You're absolutely correct.
Yeah. So yeah, I and that was even another thing is after even having certain experiences, when I look back on initiations or just certain ways that the temple was even set up for the Gnostic Mass, or the way people moved and things were done, I was like, holy fuck, I never would have fucking seen that.
Yeah.
And it's just like, wow, like to me, it's just like, holy shit, like how deep does this shit go? Like,
although I think there are multi layers to things, right?
Oh,
and the process of like what the Gardnerians from the outside are sometimes seen as being like overly elaborate, right? Or like like having too much setup or too much stuff, but it's all kind of a trigger, right? Like when I'm setting up an altar for a ritual, as I'm putting things in their places and cleaning the room and getting things set up, all of that is kind of speaking to the deeper mind and saying we're getting ready for ritual. And so every little step moves me a little deeper into that Gnostic mindset. So by the time the ritual starts, I'm in this really good trancy place because I've been slowly, as I'm setting up, getting into that spot. But at the same time, sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, right? Like I was doing a ritual. I said sometimes a cigar is just a cigar, because I was setting up. I was doing some kind of semi-public ritual or helping with something, and afterwards, after the ritual, somebody came up to me and they said, "I noticed at the beginning of the ritual, you knelt down and you placed things on the altar in a very specific, deliberate way. And why did you place the knife in that certain way? What was the deeper meaning?" And I said, "I put it there so I could reach it." And sometimes sometimes things are set up for the aesthetics, right? And sometimes they're set up for practicality. And I'm always going to set up for practicality.
That's funny. I like that. That is awesome, dude. Another thing I did kind of have with like initiation. What can be said publicly about initiation, or whatever that you can get into, that still gives people a real sense of why initiation might matter, why it matters in these orders and whatever that you're a part of?
So initiation, one way to think of initiation is adoption, where you are, you're going through the process of becoming part of a community, of a closed off community. And we go through an initiation is a milestone, and we go through a lot of milestones throughout our lives, right? And each one of them is going to change us in a specific way. Whether it's like, the first day of kindergarten through high school graduation to first marriage, first divorce, losing your virginity, getting married again, retiring, all these different things that happen in our lives, are in their own way initiatory. Like, I've never been married, so I don't really know how it feels to be married. And somebody can explain to me what it means to be married, but until I'm married, I'm not going to be able to share that experience, right? Because when that happens, when somebody goes through a marriage or a wedding or whatever, there is a change in who they are. But more than anything, it is, if you are if you're becoming a part of community, there is a certain level of trust that has to develop, where, like, at my initiation, I'm thinking, can I trust these people that this was not an elaborate setup and they're not serial killers? Right? Like, they're saying that they've all been through this and came out the other end just fine, but, I have no proof of that yet. They are thinking, is this person going to keep his oaths? Is this person really going to, protect the tradition in the future? He says he is, but, we're going to trust him. But that's a big leap of faith. And so that, I think people moving towards something initiatory have those fears of, who are these people really on the other side? Not realizing that the people on the side are going, all we can do is hope we're making a good choice here by bringing this person in. And a lot of times with anything initiatory, people are like, "Oh, okay, well, sign me up. I want to go and do that. When can I be initiated?" And I'm like, "Okay, 9 months to a year from now." And they're like, "But I want to do it now." And I'm like, "But I want to get to know you so that we can develop trust, so that we don't have to stall out at the beginning of initiation wondering if we can trust each other. We have to build that trust up, and we have to be able to trust each other very implicitly before we go through something initiatory."
Thank you.
Right. That trust factor is so important that I think a lot of people are even turned off from the idea of having a group around them, which is, it's cutting yourself off from multiple batteries building energy at the same time. But, you could say the same thing with any society. If you're cut off from that, then, what's even happening? Everybody going in their own directions and stuff.
Oh yeah. And it's, it's not like I'm only a witch when I'm with the coven, right? Like, we're all doing our own thing. We all have our individual interests, but we come together once every 6 weeks to a couple of months to practice together, because we enjoy doing it, but because there is, more power in numbers. And we can, from a magical perspective, all of us working together as one is going to accomplish a lot more than us working individually.
Nice.
Right. Back to the circle.
I do actually have, if you don't mind, a couple of questions, a little bit on with like theology and ritual.
Okay.
What does devotion look like in Wicca beyond the stereotype of doing spells?
So devotion is that kind of ties into the idea of priesthood, right? Where if I, the way I explained it to somebody one time, where it was, priesthood is not my religion, it's not my hobby, it's kind of my job. Where I'm not working with these deities, I'm working for them. And I'm doing devotional acts for their benefit. Gardner, in I can't remember which book it was. I want to say The Meaning of Witchcraft, because he wrote a couple of different books on kind of speculative history of where witchcraft came from. But in The Meaning of Witchcraft, he talked about the witches raise power for the gods so that the gods can assist them in making their magic. And he defined this sort of quid pro quo relationship, like we give to the gods so that the gods can give back to us. And so that for me is part of the devotion of it, where I'm, if I'm asking them for things, if I'm asking them for blessings, or if I'm asking them to just have my back in general, I'm going to be doing things for them as well. And, a lot of it's just prayer and devotion and acknowledgement. And sometimes it is offerings, or for me, a lot of times offerings are like, if you help me in this situation, here's a list of things that I am prepared to do in response. There was one time, hopefully this isn't too much of a tangent. There was one time where I had this broken down car and I had parked it in my apartment complex, and then it died, and then a tire went flat, and I was just sort of ignoring it because I just didn't want to deal with it. And the apartment complex finally called and said, you have to get rid of this car. You have to this vehicle cannot be on the premises anymore. And this is years ago. I'm hopefully much more responsible with vehicles today, but I was like, I have no idea how to do this. Like, I've never had to like get rid of a vehicle before. And so I went to my altar and I lit some candles, lit some incense, and I was like, get me through this and I will do whatever you want. Just get me through this whole car process. And weirdly, like, my high priestess called a few minutes later and was like, what are you doing? I was like, well, I have to clean this car out and get it towed. And she was like, oh, well, I'm down the street. I just happen to be in your area. Why don't I come over and help? And I was like, okay. And so we started working on stuff to get it ready. And she was like, if only we had one more person. And then, because I was home by myself, but one of my roommates walked in like seconds after she said that. He's like, hey guys, what are you doing? And I'm like, we need one more person to help us move this vehicle. And it all got taken care of. The car got donated. The apartment was happy. I was happy. And, but I kind of left this open-ended, I will do what you want, right? Because clearly things had worked out in my favor very auspiciously. And the next, like 2 weeks later, there was like a party I got invited to, and I had several obligations show up. In the middle of all of it, it was, oh, and don't forget, we're having a full moon ritual. Normally we don't meet for the full moon, but we're going to meet for this one. Like, the coven was very insistent, like, we got to do this full moon. And I realized that's what the obligation was. Like, all the other obligations had to fall away to focus on that, because I had told the gods, I will do whatever you want. And they're like, great, you have to give us more attention than everything else next weekend. And I was like, deal. That's how it worked out. And I know that was very rambly, but that's sort of the I don't want to call it transactional nature of the relationship, but it is very quid pro quo. I go to my altar every day and I do my daily devotions and say my little prayers and say my thanks to keep that relationship open. So when I do need help, I've already got that relationship. They already know that I'm there giving them energy and giving them offerings. And so they are happy to help when, it's kind of like calling your best friend that you've known for years and saying, hey, can I borrow $50? Versus calling a relative you've never actually spoken to and saying, can I borrow $1,000? Right. Like, the relationship is already there where they're going to be generous with me because I'm very generous with them.
It was a lot of times when I would do magic, or like ritual work. And for myself, I would use like Toth and Tahuti and Hathor a lot. And forgetting the other person. Oops. But yeah, there was 2 or 3 of them that I was using. And I was Zafgael. That's like that's an archangel. But that was a little bit different. Different in the sense that I wasn't really leaving anything to angels. But I don't know why. I don't know. I just wasn't leaving anything for them. But like with like Tahuti and Hathor, from using them all the time, I would just sometimes do stuff like if I didn't have anything to do on a Friday or a Wednesday, like specifically, like I just, I didn't have a reason to do anything, but would still do my daily work. Maybe sometimes instead of just, doing my LBRP and hexagram ritual and calling it a wrap, maybe I would just like give offerings or do some sort of devotional thing and saying thanks, since I've been working with you oftenly, I ain't got nothing else going on, so I'm telling you thanks. I would do stuff like that. And then, eventually I moved up to like working with archangels and just like ideas of the Sephiroth, the idea of God with the Kabbalistic tree. So like I really wasn't leaving offerings. It was more of just prayers and theurgy. But I did do that a lot with the Egyptian god. So I get the whole devotional thing. I even think, oh man, even Crowley has Libra Astarte.
Yeah.
And that's a lot of people use that for like devotional work that I knew. So,
well, and I think, when people think of devotions and offerings, it doesn't always have to be something physical, right? Like prayer can be an offering.
Oh yeah.
Or, song and dance and just, like singing their praises. Like an offering doesn't necessarily have to be a physical thing.
Oh, I was even with the Egyptians. Yeah, that was so easy. It was just barley and honey. Call it a wrap. Like some of their offerings, that was like traditional shit. It was like so easy. I was like, this is,
There's a line from the Page of the Goddess that says, nor do I demand aught in sacrifice, right? Like the gods do not expect sacrifices from us. And I've always taken that to mean that doesn't say they don't appreciate it. It just says it's not obligatory.
It'd even be just your time and effort. Like sometimes if I was trying to, be nice, I'd make natron. It took me a couple of minutes to make and bake in the oven, and then I gave it to him.
No, absolutely. Like, I think all efforts like that are appreciated.
Yeah. But
I think that's we kind of lose when we don't have the community around us. Is there's a give and take going on within the community, and you could see this with the potluck rituals within the Native Americans, and you could see this all throughout Europe. Is like you're bringing the sacrifices less about maybe bargaining and more about this is how we maintain cohesion. And so
Absolutely.
Being so individualized nowadays, it's really hard to see who we should be saying thank you to, but when you've got a more personalized connection, you can kind of start to understand, hey, there's a lot of people you should be thanking. And that being in tune with that brings you back into harmony with yourself. And a lot of people are just, why do that?
That's where so much of paganism moving online kind of did a number to the greater pagan community, because, there is less of that sense of community now. And even in my area where there is a fairly large pagan community, but I don't know that there's, a lot of physical socialization as much anymore as there used to be. But, when you combined meeting in person with the internet, there were all these like online resentments that would translate into the real world. And a lot of groups kind of fell apart and friendships fell apart because of things that were going on, how people were saying online. And, the individualization of paganism forced, communities to just not have as much emphasis, or they're not being any emphasis on community anymore. And that's really a shame, because that was one of the cool things about paganism in general, is that there was that sense of community of it, being able to rely on each other.
Yeah. Nice. Thank you very much, man. Another one, if you don't mind. It's kind of a 3-part question.
Okay.
You're great with all these questions. You let me rock them out, man. This is actually probably one of the more in-depth interviews I've done recently. I've gotten so many questions off. Thank you. What is what is ritual doing psychologically, spiritually, and magically inside a coven setting, in your opinion?
So what's it doing? Say those again. Physically?
Psychologically, spiritually, and magically.
That's a good question, and I think they're all kind of intertwined.
Okay.
So well, I'm going to start in the middle. I'm going to start with spirituality, because that is, I think, a term that gets so. It's a term that people don't necessarily have a definition to. So I kind of came up with one because I've been around so many people throughout my life who are like, I'm not religious, but I'm spiritual. And I'm like, what does that mean? And like, I'm dead inside, but I like crystals. Like it's, like there's not.
Sounds
like,
so emo.
Yeah. So for me, spirituality is the process of becoming who we're supposed to be. And so within a coven setting, like witch is very much entrenched as part of my identity. So when I'm in a coven setting, I am doing what I am supposed to be doing. This is who and what I am, and this is the role I play in the greater world. Psychologically, there is a sense of focus where, for like with the idea of casting a circle, right? Like, within like traditional Wicca, the circle is not really protective, right? Like it does create a barrier or a boundary, but it's more about turning your attention inward. We're not going to worry about what's going on outside the circle. We're not going to worry about what's going on down the hall or in the other room or outside. Our attention is turned inward, right? We're focusing on what's going on inside the circle. For me, that was a really cool psychological tool because I have scorching ADHD. And so being able to, set aside everything that's going on elsewhere and just focus on what we're working on within the coven, is a huge benefit. Magically, I think what goes on in the coven is, again, kind of fulfilling a role. Especially the idea of turning the wheel, right? There was a quote from a witch whose name I want to say was Amanda back in the day, and I got the name wrong. I already know I have the name wrong, but it was a young woman who was in a Gardenian coven in England, and somebody interviewed her and said, why are you a witch? Why do you practice witchcraft? And she said, because if we didn't do it, the sun wouldn't come up. And everyone took that, like, read this article and they were like, well, she's batshit insane, right? But it is this idea that we are contributing to the seasons, right? Like we are putting effort into moving from one period to the next period, of moving from one Sabbath to the next Sabbath. We're physically kind of pushing the world forward is the magical idea behind it. And that, like, we're, if we were thinking in terms of like an agrarian society, we would be, doing these rituals around May 1st because we've just planted a bunch of crops. And so we're doing these rituals so the crops will grow. And then in August, we're going to be doing these rituals because we're harvesting the crops and we want it to be a good harvest, right? Like we want the harvest to go smoothly. We don't want anybody getting their hand caught in a combine or anything. We want this to go as bloodlessly as possible. And then, in the middle of December, the coldest night of the year, we want the sun to come back the next day, right? We want the days to start getting longer. And so there's this idea that within the coven, we are contributing to all of those things happening. We're doing what we can to make sure that everything stays on track.
Well, it's sort of like a contributing to the desire to make things better, right?
Yeah.
That's part of the goal, is you want to be desiring better things instead of being focused on the negative and focused on your own.
Like looking towards part, you mentioned fertility at the very beginning of all this, and there is, Wicca is often referred to as a fertility religion, and I think more in terms of prosperity. not like we're all going to be like rolling around in our millions, but that, you know, the tradition is going to prosper. We as people are going to prosper. We are going to survive. Right, like that. And so that's part of the goal of the rituals, especially these seasonal rituals that we're doing, is that we are ensuring our prosperity.
Yeah. Fertility being an energy has been sort of lost throughout all of these generations. Whereas, you know, if you're actually connected to the land, if you're engaged with the spirits of the land, you understand how vital and important seeing the fertility of the land is to the betterment of that land. And it's like desertification, right? You want the life to bloom. You want the spring to come. It's less about you know, everybody having their way with each other in a field, and more about what is this fertility energy and how do we increase it? How do we contact it? How do we get in touch with it? It's you know, it's fertility in all its forms.
You know, I'm going to start, because something you said made me think of this. I want to see if I can get people to start saying fecundity instead of fertility, because I know exactly what you're saying when you describe fertility. Like that's you have a very specific, very, very clear image that you're getting across. But for a lot of people, the word fertility is very vague, and it really comes from Victorian anthropology, because, you know, anthropology is a fairly new field of study in the grand scheme of things, and it was very speculative and very Eurocentric for a long time, and also very Victorian. And so anything that, you know, as these folklorists were going out and studying things, and they would say, and this was for fertility, because if they said, you know, and this was for fucking, then they would get brought up on obscenity charges. So fertility became this very nice way to talk about anything that kind of smacked of something sexual, and became a very common word to use within paganism. And I think you're using it in a very accurate way, but I'm also thinking that it might help other pagans out there to start thinking in terms of the fecund versus the fertile. Right. Because it's a word with less baggage to it.
And, you know, at the end of the day, it's like, how do you define your cosmology? Is the world being spoken into existence, or is it fucking into existence? You know, and if you're bringing that perspective of, hey, everything, life comes from life, so there has to be some connection with the physical act of bringing life into the world, then you can kind of see why that would be reflected in internal practices and external manifestations.
Yeah. And it's one of those things where, and again, because the word fertility has kind of gotten all this baggage, I remember reading something somewhere, like a Facebook group full of people who hated Wicca, and they had like a "We Hate Wicca" thread in the group where you could post what for whatever reason you hated Wicca. And this one kid was like, they had this emphasis on fertility, and I'm asexual, and I am very offended by the fertility. And I'm like, even if you are asexual, you can still have an understanding of fertility. Like an amoeba is still fertile, right? This like genderless blob but it still reproduces. It still tears in two and becomes two amoeba, right? It doesn't have to just be this idea of just sexual.
Yeah.
You know, it's creative in general.
Creative fecundity. I think those are two words that really go hand in hand.
I like that. Creative fecundity.
I'm going to start saying, the next time somebody says Wicca is a fertility religion, I'm going to say it's actually a creative fecundative religion, and just blow their whole mind.
Yo, you got to coin that, man.
A t-shirt made. I'm going to sell t-shirts that say creative fecundity.
You heard it first on the Occult Rejects. Creative fecundity.
It's the new name of my character.
I love it. Another question. This might, I guess maybe as easy as you can, because this could be time consuming. I mean, it probably would be for me if I wanted to get really into it. But for someone who has never really experienced circle casting, what is that kind of like in the ritual sense?
That is a good question. And I can probably, we're going to see if I can describe this concisely.
Okay. Got faith.
It is basically just a system of steps to get everyone onto the same page, get everyone into a good ritualistic mindset, and then get everyone out of it smoothly. So it's and like we were talking about, the idea of the circle is really just to prevent distraction. So it can be kind of weird to be like in the middle of circle, and then especially with my ADHD, like nothing can stop it. It can be tamped down for time, but it's going to fight through. To just be in circle and then suddenly kind of realize that the rest of the world exists, because I've spent the past hour focused specifically on just the activities in this one little delineated area. It is, and part of the reason why there are several, why there are steps to a good circle casting is so that nothing is jarring. Right? It's like, it would be like when we were talking about Baptist preachers earlier, like they start off preaching and they're speaking in like a normal tone, and then they slowly work their way up, and the congregation is kind of going with them. Like, imagine how awful church would be if you sat down and the minister walked up and just started screaming at you. Right? Like, how would circle go for the newcomer if we're like, okay, it's time for circle, and then our eyes are rolling back in our heads and we're all screaming and chanting in tongues or whatever, with not bringing them along with us, right? So it creates a sense of, and I don't know that this is the right word, but it's the first word that comes to me. It creates a sense of normalcy out of a very abnormal situation, where you've got the altar set up, and you've got you physically draw the circle, and then everything that happens after that, it just feels like the right thing to do. Like, okay, we're going to dance around naked now. Okay, that seems fine. If we hadn't had the steps building up to that to get into the right mindset for the naked dancing, it would feel really weird to just start naked dancing.
Right.
And then, but there's a time and place for everything. And so we want to, okay, now we're finished with the naked dancing, and we want to ease back into the mundane world and go be a part of society again, not go back into society where we might tear our clothes off and start dancing at any moment because because we're so jazzed. No, we've let that part go. We've set that aside, and we move back into the real world. So it's just a process. It's a process of moving people up into the ritual and moving them back out.
One thing I did want to ask, I guess, kind of too in there, like for myself, and this would go for like even I've been at plenty OTO meetings that were open to the public, wasn't even closed, so I'm not saying anything too crazy. But like if somebody was to come for a specific, could even be for the book of the law, that's 3 days they do something. Whenever they were to do a group ritual or whatever, there would always be either like the LBRP and or the Star Ruby done prior to anything else first. Mm-hmm. Do you guys have anything like calling to the corners or any sort of like actual circle or ritual go on before anything, or is that in your thing at all?
It's we really just kind of get in there and get going. There's not a lot of like pre-ritual preparations other than just like physically cleaning a space.
Now some do that though, right? Or am I wrong?
Oh yeah. Well, and there's still, of course, the process of like setting up the circle, right? Like there's going to be a ritual to create the circle itself. And to invite in the spirits we want to invite in, and so there is a process there. I think it's more evident in a public setting. Like if we do if my coven's been involved in a couple of like big kind of public group rituals, and then it becomes a lot more apparent and a lot more evident because you're having to explain to the crowd what you're doing while you're doing it, but in a way that doesn't disrupt the flow of the ritual, if that makes sense.
Gotcha.
So it becomes a little more wordy and a little more theatrical, where like in a like when it's just my coven, we're like, okay, and now we're going to set up the circle and we're going to do the things to make the circle and we're moving forward. But if I'm involved in a public ritual where there are going to be people there who have never experienced anything like this, and they're going to be people who've been doing this for 30 years. So, if I'm going to, and now I am raising up this particular ritual tool, and I am calling to the watchtowers in the east, who are the powers of air, and I am bringing air in to do this specific thing. And it sounds very like, oh, wow, he's doing this big magical working. And what I'm really doing is just trying to explain to everybody what's going on so that they can get something out of it and understand, but also feel comfortable.
Oh. That's interesting. Because that's very probably because I do know practicing Wiccans, I think they're solitary though, that do use some form of pentagram ritual. So that's kind of like what as well.
I think that's sort of going to be kind of more of for like individual tastes, especially because there are a lot of Wiccans, both traditional and solitary, and who have some background in ceremonial magic, or who got into ceremonial magic after becoming a Wiccan initiate, and found tools there that work for them really well. And I have friends who on their own will do like the LBRP before their own personal rituals. So I think there's an interesting crossover or intersection between traditional Wicca and ceremonial magic, because there was ceremonial magic that was brought in to kind of flesh out the original rituals that were being practiced by the New Forest Coven, and a lot of them were tossed out. But even in folk magic today, though, like when you look at like African American folk magic, there is a lot of Kabbalah in it, because ceremonial magic does tend to trickle down into the folk magic.
Oh, thank you.
Martinism too.
Hello, what do you think?
No, man, I think this has been a great interview.
Yeah, I don't think I mean, if I have maybe one more, but no, I think we'll wrap it up there. That was really good, dude. Yeah, you said a lot. What do you think? No, I'm not complaining at all. That's what I was saying. I thought it was a great interview, actually. Got to ask a lot of questions, and you went in depth on. I can't complain.
I have been like literally studying all day, like I was preparing for oral exams, because I'm terrible with names and dates. So I was all prepared for like, okay, so it's 1853, and Alexander Hislop, a Presbyterian minister, wrote that. Like, I was ready to go. I didn't know what to expect, so I had all bases covered.
Damn. I gotta get you back on for that one. But Thumper, thank you so much, man. Always a pleasure having you on, and hopefully have you on again in the future.
I will, and we committed, and we got through the technical difficulties, and I'm so relieved.
Right. Yo, dude, right? It's been probably shouldn't knock on wood now. I should have said that. Yeah, no, I was even thinking that throughout, halfway through it. I was like, yo, it's like the only first 15 minutes I got to worry about editing. We're good to go. I was like, that's great. I thought it was honestly, I thought it was going to be an issue the whole time, but I was like, I'll try. And it was awesome. I thought.
I'm not great with technology in general, but I found myself getting very angry, and it was an absolute exertion of will over my cell phone. I was like, we are doing this my way, and you will not.
There you go. That's a true magician. True. Awesome. Headless, let everybody know what's up with you, where they can find all your stuff.
You can find me on X at Headless Giant. You can find me on Twitter and YouTube, also at Headless Giant. And if you want, come check us out tomorrow at 8:30. We're doing more remote viewing, and I'm going to be the one taking the pictures this time. So I'm going to definitely get the envelopes right. And if you've got any stories you want us to read on the show, you can email them to me at theheadlessgiantpodcast@gmail.com, and we will read those interesting occult/strange stories that you send in. So definitely get those emails out there. And also on Sundays, you can check out the Trilog at 10:30 Central. Me, Ethan Indigo, and Ricard Calvadio, when he's not on assignment, are going to be talking about the day's events and the week's events. So definitely check that out as well. And we did a great 777 episode yesterday where we're getting into the nitty gritty of how Gematria, isopsophy, and Kabbalah are all connected in the sacred geometric formulas. So check out yesterday's episode on 777. It was a good one.
Yeah, I really dig that. Yeah, for sure. And Thumper, please let everybody know what's up with you. Promote whatever you want, your books, whatever.
Absolutely. So we already talked about the Chaos Apple. I've got my website is thumperforge.com. I am on pretty much every social media platform at Fivefold Law. So you can find me. I'm mainly on TikTok is where I do my best work, but you can find me on Blue Sky, Threads, all over the place at Fivefold Law. And then in 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks, April 5th, I will be presenting at Austin Witch Fest, which is a one-day event in Austin that somehow, as a one-day event, is like the largest pagan gathering in the U.S. So there'll be a couple of thousand people there, and I am running a presentation called "The Hell Is a Chaos Witch." So we're going to be talking about chaos magic and witchcraft.
Let's talk to you about that. That sounds interesting. Be a good advertisement to show up there.
Yeah, and it's $15 a ticket. It's just this one-day thing. They bring in all these amazing speakers, and we just like do witchcraft all day, and then we all go home.
I love it. $15 for the day. The events that me and him go to would be like, yeah, it's $200, please.
No, they've always kept it for one day so they can keep the ticket prices low. It is the most insane vendor room you've ever seen. It is like just miles of booths of every kind of
they got booths there. Oh fuck. Okay, interesting. I'll send you you have to send me some email information on that or whatever.
Yeah, I'll send you the website.
Yeah, thank you. And Thumper, again, thank you so much for coming on. For real, I would love to get you back on again. I mean, even if I got somebody coming on for Wicca or Chaos Magic, if you want to jump on too. I mean, I really like having you on.
Literally just say when, and I will be here. You guys are my favorites.
Yeah, no, I really enjoy having you on, dude. It's great stuff. And also for people, again, we did mention the Chaos Apple. If you did not check that out yet, go check it out. It's probably been out like maybe a month or so ago, whatever. Go check that out. Awesome book. I highly suggest it. I actually had the book and I had read part of it, and I can tell you that I do think it's a good read. I think there's a lot of information in there, and it's not going to be boring. It's very full and very educational. So I highly suggest it.
I will say it has like 25 5-star reviews on Amazon and only one 1-star review. So I like those odds.
I like that too. Right? The other person was probably just jealous, really. So.
They didn't realize that some of the pages were upside down on purpose, so they thought they got a misprint. They wanted to warn other people about the misprint.
Yeah, that's funny.
So if I'm going to get a 1-star review, that's the one I want. I was very pleased with it.
Yeah, that is awesome. As soon as I saw that, I was like, "Oh, that is awesome." That I knew it was intentional. I was like, "That's good."
That was my publisher's idea. The designer of the book that I was working with was like, they had this idea and they pitched it to me and they were like, "What do you think?" And I said, "I'll get back to you." And I literally went to the most autistic person I know, and I was like, "If some of the pages are printed upside down, what would you think of that?" And they thought about it. They were like, "That would mean that I would need to stop and reorient the book, which would cause me to reorient how I'm thinking and pay specific attention to these details in the book." And I was like, "Sold, we're doing it."
Yeah. So I was like, "Yo, this is good. That's pretty cool." Yeah, very good stuff. Again, Thumper, thanks for coming on. Headless, thank you for jumping on too. I always appreciate it. Great questions. I thought that was a solid interview again. And thank you everybody in the chat. That's what's up. And until the next one, everybody be well. Later.